Is Joanne Jenkins. I work with the board of Galilee a lot. That's what happens when you're chair. But tonight my role is to serve as co-chair of the Education Subcommittee of Reimagining America Project to tell you about welcome to this town hall meeting, which we hope will be an honest, open conversation about how we're doing. So with that, I would like to introduce you to Rodney Sadler, who is the chair of Reimagining America Project.
Good evening, everyone. How are you doing? It's a privilege and honor to be with you today. I'm not the chair of the Reimagining America Project. I'm co-chair with my partner, Jennifer Roberts. So let's give her a hand, please. The Reimagining America Project is an idea that was born of a great need. We know that we in this nation have a long history of racial issues, but a very short history of trying to do anything about it. We know that we as Americans have had at least 404 years of wrestling with the way that we treat black and brown people, particularly people from the African continent, but we have done so very little about it. Over the years, we've waited for someone to finally come up and make a change. We've waited for this president to come in, waited for this new elected official to come into office, and we're always frustrated in that. So the Reimagining America Project is born of people's desire to say, it's time that we step up and do something about it. Amen? Let's take this into our hands. We're all community leaders. We're all able to begin to work towards a change. One of the things that we said is that we can no longer just work on education or work on voting rights or work on the criminal justice system. We look at this system and we realize that there are interconnected tentacles. In order to have any measurable success, we have to look at the way that each of these systems interacts, interrelates, and is intersectional. So we have a number of different subgroups that are looking at everything from education to healthcare to environmental justice, et cetera, in order to say, how do we make the targeted shifts in each of these areas that are necessary to make a just system going forward. And part of this conversation tonight is born of that larger work. The Education Committee has been looking at what's been going on in Charlotte, North Carolina, and the Charlotte-Mecklenburg school system. We look at this very diverse school system in a city that's incredibly segregated. We know that there are not one, but probably at least two different school systems at play in this one school system. Not because of the failures of our leaders, but because of the divisions that exist in our city. How do we find a way forward to make this collective system whole? How do we find a way of educating students that might help them to reduce this significant gap in attainment in education? Well, one of the ways that we've thought about that might work has been community schools model. So a couple weeks ago, we had a wonderful conversation led by, Miss Shemaya Haynes. And she was saying that we need to look at this as a potential new model. As a follow-up, we decided to have a town hall where we could come together and raise some additional questions and dig deeper into it. So I'm glad that you're all here tonight. Please feel free to not just listen to this conversation, but contribute to it. Find ways forward. We with Reimagining America Project are all about citizen leadership, stepping up to the plate, and finding a better way forward for us as Americans. If we can do that, then we just truly might have that America we all strive for, where we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all human beings are created equal and treated by their government equally as well. Amen? Amen. Thank you for your time. I look forward to this conversation this evening. Joanne.
I want to read something to you before. There's a lot of paper around and there's pens everywhere, and so I'm going to ask you to do a question, but I don't I had the privilege of serving, you probably have heard about a community building initiative, and this is the report from 1997. Yeah, I was there. A little thinner, a little more, didn't have to use the glasses. But in the school needs, no, and tonight is not shaming or blaming, it's just talking, okay? So this is on page 52 of the 1997 report. Even with new schools and aggressive renovation program, how many years between 23 and 27? In case I lose track.
26.
Okay. Some schools continue to have deficiencies. A 1995-1996 survey by the school system found 21 schools with fewer than 50 books copyrighted in the 1990s on subjects that included science, history, and geography. And then they listed the schools. And the schools are still very fragile. 8 schools were among those, the third worst third grade reading scores out of 273 schools in a 17 county region. And then they listed the schools again. So one of the things that happens is nothing goes away unless the payoff goes. Behavior does not change unless the payoff is removed. So the question tonight is, what is the payoff in keeping this kind of chaos going? And we know now that very few of the kids in school are reading at grade level at CMS. So what I would like you to do before I turn it over to Kevin Woodson, he co-chairs this with me, to introduce our speaker. I want you to write down the number on one of the pieces of paper in front of you. And I want you to ask yourself how many more years you have to give to this before you can walk away. Ask yourself first, how many more years do you have to give to this before you walk away? And then the second number I want you to write down is how many more years should you have to wait as a taxpayer in this city till change takes place. All right, Kevin.
Thank you, Joanne. Most of you know me. I've been around a couple of years. I've seen both sides of the sun a couple of times. So, I'm familiar with what's going on. I am a product of Detroit Public Schools. I graduated from a nationally recognized school, and I can't remember the name for it, but there are several of them around town. But we had a unique situation as a magnet school. My parents were faced with what many parents here in Charlotte are faced. Didn't want me to go to the local school. Didn't think that it was capable of handling all of the things that I could give to the school. Which was a unique way of phrasing it. Usually it's, can the school give something to my child? Well, they planned for me to be able to give to the school. So I ended up going to Cass Technical High School, which in 1954 was the number 3 rated high school in the country. Now again, it's integrated, so the numbers have gone down, but it's still considered to be a very prominent school within the Detroit Public School System. I'm also a former school board member in Schaumburg, Palatine, Illinois. 4 of our 5 schools were also national honor schools. So all that's to say is that I have high standards for schools, because I know what schools can do. And we all know that there are problems. But I'm also a product of the auto industry, because I lived in Detroit. And many times in the auto industry, people said, well, how do the Japanese make better cars than they do in the U.S.? And the answer is systemic. In the auto industry in Detroit, you have a bad car, you pull the car off the line, move it over into an area, and you have these people that work on that car.
to get it up to speed, to get them out the door. And that worked for many, many years. Until all of a sudden the Japanese cars started showing up, and they were like, they don't have any problems with the Japanese car. Why? Because the problem is systemic. Find what's wrong with the line, shut the line down, and fix it so every car that comes off works. Don't rely on people to say, oh, look, you're not meeting the standard. Let's pull it off and let's put you over here and work on you individually. Or God forbid, let's create a class or a room and throw all of you in there. Let's find out what's wrong with the system. So I met Shemai a number of years ago. I will leave it at that. But one of the things that I know that she looks at, what's wrong with the system? How do we fix the system? Now, we're here not to fix the system. We're here to talk about what a fixed system would look like. And we may have some ideas. And that's why we ask you to come. Give us some ideas. What do you think we could do to fix the system? Now, the key is not the child, the system. Okay? We spend way too much time trying to fix the child. But if the system's broken, what does that mean? Tomorrow there's going to be another child in the same predicament. We have to fix it. So having discussed, she saw this, and it's a product of the Cincinnati schools. My kids went to Cincinnati schools. I lived there for 2 years. My son and daughter both, my daughter was in kindergarten, my son was second grade, and when we left, they were first graders and third graders. So I've seen Cincinnati. But what I really liked was that they address it as systemic. How can we change the system? And I always say, oh, well then who do we put it on? Who's going to be responsible? The model you'll see tonight is based on everybody being responsible. I was not the greatest fan of the Clintons, but I do remember it takes a village to raise a child. And what we're talking about here is how can we get the community in to help raise a child, to deal with the issues that they see. And I don't mean coming in and start taking over classes and all. No. The child needs to be awake, fed, secure, clothed, and assured that they can do what needs to be done to learn. And that's a community responsibility, in my mind. Now, that may not be the way it is, but what we're talking about is how can we get the community to take ownership of what comes out of the community so that they stay in the community and can contribute back to the community. Those are my words, not hers. I'm sure she has a better way of saying it.
Maybe not. I don't know.
So, having said all that, I could go through the litany of accomplishments. Just understand she's a mother, she's raising kids, they're productive. And to me, that's the best thing I look for in terms of trying to judge whether they can work with other kids. For your discussion and point, Shemai Haynes.
Well, thank you. So before we get started into this presentation, there are a couple of things that we should understand about the community schools model, and that this model is an equity-based model. That means that it has built-in equity just in its implementation. It takes a wide range of collaboration to be successful. It takes all of us. And what happens is when we're in communities that are low resourced, we find that we do have some resources. And it's just a question of what do we do with what we have. I'm going to talk a little bit higher level because these are some of the questions that I've received personally. We know that our schools should be fully funded through Leandro. There's no doubt. We know that education inequity has taken place in our society since forever. We know that. What we're challenged with is fighting for Leandro, fighting for full funding, and working those processes out. But in the meantime, our children can't wait until somebody in North Carolina or on the federal government decides that this is important. This model takes the challenges that we have as a community and puts us in the driving seat in terms of where we want to be for our children. What attracted me to this model is that I've always had a philosophy that no matter where you are in society, you can make a change and an impact, and there are assets built into you as a person. We have so many people who are custodians. We have painters. We have people who have clerical skills in our community. And I know for a fact we have some beauticians out here, okay? But we never ask people, we assume that because a person is living in a marginalized community, that they don't have anything to offer their children, or they don't have anything to offer the school. As many people that we have in our community that do hands-on work, our schools should never be dirty. The ground should always be clean, and our children should be taken care of, and they can be. And we know that when people are challenged with a responsibility, they'll live up to that challenge. But the truth of it is, and the biggest inequity has come because we have not been challenged as a community to build into our children and in our schools. So I wanted to put that out there in the forefront. This is not to take the place of fully funding education. That is not what this is. It's simply saying we can't wait until all of that happens. We need to do it now. So, to give a little bit of background about this, excuse me. What I'll do first is I'll give a little bit of background about how the community schools model came about to Charlotte. Back in 2017, I met a school social worker who had worked in this model in New York City. This model is evidence-based, which means a number of districts have tried it and decided that if it's executed with full fidelity, we will see some good changes in terms of academic improvement, school culture, and some other things. When she presented this model, the only thing I was really interested in at that time was creating a solid volunteer infrastructure in a school. Long story short, she was hired to execute the model. She never got a chance to, but we talked about it for years. When do you think we could introduce this? How do you think we could push this through? Do you think people would go for it? And we always felt that it wasn't the right time. Well, then the pandemic hit. And the wheels started to turn again about, okay, well, if we had the community schools model, it would have been much easier for us to get those galvanized resources for parents and for the community because the schools themselves would have a way to service wraparound services in a more decentralized way. And we would already have identified many of the assets that we spent months trying to identify during the pandemic. So, of course, anybody that knows me, I seized the opportunity to circle back up with the Charlotte Community Think Tank, and we decided to take the community schools model as one of our projects. Most people, when they heard about it, they said, ooh, that sounds great. Is CMS gonna be on board? I'm like, I don't know, but are you on board? Yeah, I'm on board. Okay, that's all we need. In long conversations, long story short, the United Way stepped up, and they also, but in addition to that, they bought Communities in Schools, which is a program that, an organization that operates within CMS schools, and they're in all of the Title I schools. The advantage to that is they already have relationships, and they have some partnerships already built into the school. And honestly, they're the ones who coordinate many of the wraparound services. Now, The community, some people thought, well, why would communities in schools want to do this? Because that's in direct competition with community schools model. Well, it actually isn't. And here's why. Communities in schools has a certain amount of children that they see on a case management basis. This model calls for not only for all children to receive wraparound services, but also for the school to execute services outside of the school day. Perhaps it could be ESL classes, it could be GED classes, it could be a variety of things. A full service community school actually has, can be open as early as however in the morning and close as late as however long at night, doing all sorts of programming. There are some schools that actually physically have medical clinics and dental clinics, legal clinics, immigration clinics, I think that's what that might be called, all sorts of things. Those resources are identified not just by the school family, but also the overall community. So that is the power and the value. We call it communities in schools on steroids. That's the best way to describe it. Anyway, we secured funding to explore this model in 2 schools. We went through a long process of identifying the 2 schools because collaboration, everybody wants collaboration, but collaboration is not always the fastest way to do things, but it's the best way to do things. We held meetings, we did all these things, and one of the things that was so important to us was to get buy-in from the schools to say, we want to explore this model. We have a desire to, and to be sure that they really sort of understood what they were getting into. Okay, I promise I'll start the presentation. Okay. So, Min Shayez Ari is the president and CEO of Communities in Schools. Of course, that's me. As 2 leaders, we've been working together in partnership with each other. And I do have to say this, being a smaller organization, a relatively new organization, Min Shayez has taken his time, even as a big CEO with all of the funding and everything and pulls to his time. We've actually worked hands-on with one another throughout this process. I'm not going to go through the missions of both organizations. What I do want to do is show you a video of, it sort of describes the community schools model in a way that it just took me several minutes to talk about a few things, and this can do it in just a few minutes, so here we go.
Tell me about the school. What am I seeing here? What's this? My name is Darlene K. Mine, and I'm the executive director of the Community Learning Center Institute. Teeth up on the top of the roof? Yeah. That's interesting that you know it. For the past 10 years, the Institute has been an independent nonprofit dedicated to the creation, promotion, and continued advancement of community learning centers. Cincinnati Public Schools developed this concept of what others know to be community schools, which is essentially a whole of partnerships that are co-located or in some other way selected and connected to the school to address all of the conditions that are necessary for learning for those as community learning centers. And at this point in time in Ohio, community learning centers are primarily connected to traditional public schools. In 1970 in Cincinnati, we had 90,000 students in Cincinnati public schools. About 70% of those students were middle class and above. There were also about 500,000 people living in the city of Cincinnati. So we were at a very high point and we were thriving. By 1999, we had 45,000 students in Cincinnati public, so about half in 29 years. And of that 70%, it was a mirror image, 70% below the poverty line. And Again, the inextricability of the linkage between the success of schools and the success of the community. We lost 200,000 people from the city of Cincinnati. We were, as a city and as a school district, in great crisis. The Cincinnati Public Schools tried very hard to come up with reforms. New curriculum, computers, anything that would create maybe an excitement and a belief that things were changing. And the district really found absolutely no results because the trust had been lost between the community and the public school system. When we started developing community learning centers, it was in connection with the rebuilding of all of the schools as a result of a mandate from the Supreme Court of Ohio that all schools needed to be upgraded to be safe, warm, and dry. They were in very poor condition. And at the time, Cincinnati Public Schools passed a policy that every neighborhood, every school would have the opportunity to create their school as a community learning center. Regardless of their academic functioning, regardless of socioeconomics, the idea was really an opportunity to be able to create every school as a center of its neighborhood. The city of Cincinnati is comprised of 52 distinct neighborhoods. There are typically at least one school in each neighborhood, each with its own community council, and really its own culture. We refer to those neighborhoods often as each neighborhood is its own country, but it literally is all under the city of Cincinnati. My background is as an attorney, and so I didn't have a professional planning background, but I approached it with the very same expectation that people in the community. What would I want if this were my child? What would I want if this were my neighborhood? And it just was being a very honest, genuine kind of relationship, building with one by one with people in the neighborhood that helped me bring other people to the table. And ultimately, that process became, and is still to this day, a very, very unique hallmark of the Foundation for Community Schools in Cincinnati, or Community Learning Centers in Cincinnati. There are two important elements to sustainability for the community learning centers that we've developed in Cincinnati. One is grounded in community engagement. The amount of time and heart and work that the entire community has been involved with in each one of our community learning centers really sustains it. And so making sure that you have all of those folks that are always genuinely connected and owning their community learning center will sustain that no matter what the changes in all of the other kinds of political and administrative hierarchies there might be. Secondly, financial sustainability. We knew from the very beginning that the reason that public education went into so many dips is because there was an inconsistency in funding. So sometimes there would be a tax levy and sometimes there wouldn't. And sometimes the political winds would shift funding and we would be without. So we knew that we had to build a system where all of these supports and all of these partnerships and everything that wasn't strictly teaching books, the building itself, would be taken care of by other natural revenue streams. So what can you see now? That's wonderful. You look wonderful, and most importantly, you can sing wonderfully. I think the process of remaking or improving public education really begins and belongs to the public themselves. And I think that perhaps where we've gone off the rails a little bit is thinking about what's good for them, good for other people. And I have never, ever been disappointed by the wisdom, by the insight, by the passion of the people. That's what community engagement is about.
Okay, so before I move forward with other aspects of the presentation, I'm just going to take a pause and ask this question. What are some of the common threads from that video that we see here in Charlotte? Anything stick out?
What stood out to me the most about the video actually was that I'm starting to notice is that if you notice from 1970 to 1999, you've seen how it increased, dramatically dropped, but the population stays up. But the problem was is that the student population dropped significantly. And that's one thing I'm noticing here as well as far as dropouts in school, because I know about 30 kids only that's just dropped out and actually about to transfer to a different county. So that's
I think part of the reason for the drop is people who have money think the schools are not meeting their needs. And so they pull their kids out and send them to a private school. And, you know, the more kids that get pulled out and put in private school, the less money that's available for the public schools. And I know what the solution to that is. My grandson is getting ready to go from 5th grade into 6th grade, so he's going from elementary school into middle school. And I would say probably a third of the kids in his class are going to be going to private school. And I just, I don't know how to stop that, but it's not, you know, it's not good for the kids, because they become more and more isolated. And people live with, go to school with people that are just like them, and they never get exposed to new ideas or different cultures. And somehow or other, I think that's one of the problems, is that we need to stop to make the public schools attractive enough that people don't want to spend ridiculous amount of money to send their kids to private school.
Do you mind me asking the zip code? Is that something that's indigenous to that zip code that your grandson lives in?
The school that he goes to is his neighborhood school. It's Cotswold Elementary, but it's also an IB school, so it's a magnet school. So, but probably the kids that are, most of the kids that are going to private school are from, so there's a, I guess it's the two.
Are there any more other reflections?
I don't know that I need a microphone.
Yeah, I was just thinking about this, the amount of poverty within the larger system seemed to be a significant issue. And the need to find solutions that may not just be investing more money in the system, but finding ways of utilizing the resources that are already there.
Good reflections, everybody. Okay, hold on. Sorry. Oh, man, we got you.
So I talk about this all the time. When I had a 2-year stint where I was a teacher, a substitute teacher, and I floated through various schools. And as a mother with 2 sons that matriculated through CMS, if they had come home and told me the things that happened in the school, I would not have believed them until I saw them with myself. So the parallels that I see is, like Reverend Sanders said, the poverty, but it's just in a different magnitude, and it's just in a different format from today. It's like, okay, how do you as a community deal with a few kids that are being sex trafficked in the school? How do you deal with, you know, mama and daddy are working 2 jobs in order to keep a roof over our head, and so we're moving from this hotel to that hotel, and they don't have time to read to me, or they don't have time to wash my clothes, or just ordinary things that I would have been too far removed from, or not even believed. I mean, the bullying, all of those things that are interconnected, that we need interconnected services for, you know, from back then to now, fast forward to the types of services that are needed now, that is one of the biggest and saddest things that I see, that most concerns me. Because you can't just treat the child and the symptom in the school of the child. You gotta wrap the whole family in services. So it's, oh, you're getting into my business, this, that, and the third. How do you fix all that?
Any more reflections? Okay, so believe it or not, all of these reflections have been the same questions that I've received out in the community. One of the things is that this model is widely accepted by both the National Educators Association and also the American Federation for Teachers. And one of the reasons why we're looking to expand this model all over the country is because it's seen as a competitive advantage to stave off private school movements and charter school movements. Because at the end of the day, if the community has this level of trust in the public schools, we'll keep our kids in public schools. It's a tremendous hassle to even send your child to a public charter school. They're on different schedules. Most parents have a child in charter and one in traditional public school, so they're always on different schedules. Some have lunch, some have transportation, or if they do have lunch and transportation, it's not the same quality. We have children in our system that have IEPs, and they don't always get the services that they need to get. We have a variety of issues in our system that, you know, sometimes people will think, okay, the school system is really, the child is the biggest customer in the school system. But if we shift our thinking to think about the fact that it's actually the parents, because the parents make a choice for that child to either be satisfied around what's taking place or not. So we look at this model as not being the end-all be-all, but it can certainly be a competitive advantage for us in terms of instilling trust again with the community and the school. The school can be entrusted to not just educate children, but actually be an asset for the entire community. Cincinnati had a unique issue back then where they lost a series of businesses and things, so there was that shift. But also it was kind of the same, where people who could afford to yank their kids out or whatever, they did. I try to shy away from, you know, shaming parents for doing what's best for their kids. Because I've had to make some very difficult choices myself as a parent. I'm a product of public schools. I believe in public schools. That's why I still fight about public schools. But at the end of the day, we got to do something now to change it. And we got to be solution-based. We can't just stay in this mindset of complaining all the time or identifying what the problem is without a solution. So the community schools model works on 6 pillars. Well, you know what? I think I may have. Go back to that slide. There are 6 pillars that the community schools model stands on to be a successful model. And what I want to point to is, these are the six pillars that are identified. Some of these pillars are directly related to the community, others are directly related to the internal workings of the school. So, rigorous, aligned curriculum. The community itself may not pick the curriculum, but we can certainly collaborate. We can be educated about the curriculum that our children might receive. Because I don't think most parents even understand the nuances of different curriculums or what all goes into that decision making. Focus on high quality teaching. One thing about this model that I find very attractive is that because you have so many partners in the school and assets working in the school, it actually should build some sort of healthy culture in a school as well. Because if a teacher can teach, that's what teachers want to do. They don't want to have to pull a child not to do an intervention, but to actually give them crackers or, whatever. Inclusive models of leadership. Now, in the video, Darlene spoke of creating a policy so that all schools could be a community school if they wanted to be. In CMS, we actually have a policy in place that supports collaborative leadership. It's called School Leadership Team. It's called School Improvement. No, it's not School Leadership Team anymore. What is it? School Improvement Team. SIT, School Improvement Team. And if we really operated our school improvement teams to its fullest fidelity, we're actually moving towards a community schools model. Or we may have to expand it a little bit, but we have the basics of what we need. Positive discipline practices. What that means is that if a community has a desire to, say, try out something like restorative justice practices, then they come together as a community, identify the resources to be put in place to make that happen. And since the school is collaborating with the community, with all the partners, then it makes the conversation a lot easier. Authentic parent and community engagement. I'm going to spend a little bit of time on this one because we often think that if we go to a school and 100 parents show up to an event where a band is playing and food is being served and all this and that, that's engagement. That is not what this model is really calling for. This model is calling for parents to be in the midst and to be in the know about what is taking place with their school and with their children. That could look like a variety of things. Maybe that parent works 2 jobs, but that parent is also coming up to the school for GED classes. And while he or she is in GED classes, the children are getting some sort of enrichment or some sort of other learning or intervention or something like that. Parents who are in these incredible situations around their time, they want and have a desire to be with their children or to know what's going on, but we don't often support that in the school system. We don't often think about the fact that if I'm really working, even if I work 1 job and it's 3rd shift, I don't want you calling me to the school, wasting my time about something I'm not interested in. You giving me the Title I spiel because it's legally required. I want to know what can be done for me and to enhance my economic stability. So that is a big part and a major component that we as a community can impact. Wraparound support services for students, parents, and the communities that feed into our schools. I believe that in Title I schools we have wraparound services, but where we sort of falter is those services are not coordinated. So a lot of the parents don't even know what services are in the schools. Sometimes we actually do have mental health providers, but the parents don't want to sign off to get the mental health that's available to them. So there are a variety of things. It's not that we're not trying to do good, but it is kind of uncoordinated and we don't have anybody usually with that responsibility. So I'm going to go through this real fast because it's 7 of them and I've talked long enough. This model, we want to pursue equity. We want to invest in a whole child approach. We want to build on community strengths and ensure conditions. We want to use data and community wisdom to guide partnerships, programs, and processes. This is an important point because oftentimes we'll say, well, kids are failing. So the schools are failing for the parents, ain't doing what they're supposed to do. We need to hold them accountable. We need to fire the teachers, the principal, and hire another school board. But the reality of it is that community wisdom guides us in a different direction. Community wisdom guides us in a space where we can operate from solutions versus just operating from problems all the time, or just strictly what data shows. Commit to interdependence and shared accountability. Interdependence and shared accountability is very important, and it's something that we desperately need now. When you have ownership in a school, and you're up there and you're doing everything you can do, and you actually have skin in the game, and you know what's going on in your child's school, you're less likely to pull, even if the school is not necessarily achieving. You feel like you're a part of something. Likewise, if you know that members of your community is watching attendance, and that feedback is given to you on a regular basis, you're accountable to bring your children to school. Invest in building trusting relationships, that's self-explanatory, and fostering a learning organization. This model supports learning. The premise is, like Kevin spoke of earlier, is that the community handles everything. Anything outside of academics, we're responsible for that. We're accountable for that. And if we're challenged, we'll meet that challenge. Now I want to go back to this slide here. This is what the community schools model is not. I gotta get up here because I can't have my glasses on. It's not the Comer Development Program. There are some nuances. So let me explain this. There are elements of the community schools model that may sound like other models, because in education, we try different things all the time. We're trying to constantly get things right. And so really nothing that I'm presenting here is probably new in terms of what it takes to have a successful school. But somebody actually took the time and collected evidence and research and all of that. This is not the Comer model. It is definitely not Renaissance West. Renaissance West has the place-based function, but the the collaborative leadership model is not fully executed yet. And also, the heavy collaboration that this model requires, it's just not there. The Renaissance West model does have some promise in that they have what's called a purpose-built model. And the purpose-built model seeks to address all of those internal things that I talked about, like the rigorously aligned curriculum and positive discipline practices and those things. I can see at some point these two models working hand in hand, one to address one thing and one to address the other. Communities in schools, we talked about that. Project Lift. Project Lift was not an evidence-based model. It was something we were trying in CMS. And actually, my son graduated from West Charlotte and he entered Project Lift in year 2. So I know all about Lift. I ain't gonna go there. Beacon Schools. Beacon Schools is similar to the Comer model, but it doesn't allow for, it puts parents in more of an advisory role and the community in an advisory role, but not necessarily that collaborative leadership we want to see. Okay, a lot of people say, well, Shemaya, all that is good, how much is it going to cost us? The community schools model should not cost a school much of anything. Here's why. So our partner, Communities in Schools, is already in schools, and of course, you know, they do get some federal funding, they get lots of philanthropic funding, they get funding from churches and private organizations. They already have people at the school. But what could happen is, rather than case managers and case workers, you could transition that load to someone else who's actually coordinating this model in the school. They could also raise funds to bring an extra person just to do this model. You saw where there was an eye clinic in Cincinnati. Well, the private community chipped in, built a clinic, and then that school can determine which doctor that's there. That doctor comes, and the school is not paying the doctor to come. The doctor probably should be paying them because he has a captive group of patients, and every child has access to an eye doctor regardless of insurance. Just some examples. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on that. So, we've made a lot of strides. We finally got to the point where we're at what's called the exploration phase of of this model. And what that means is we got the blessing of not having to put a pilot at a school right away. The Belt Foundation and the United Way have been very supportive, and they said, you know what, we're going to give you money to explore this model with robust community engagement, school engagement, and parent engagement. We want you to simply present this model just like we're doing here, do some engagement, get some people involved. Darlene talked about how she went neighborhood to neighborhood, one person at a time, working with the people to identify. I'll be engaged in some of that work here, like within the very near future. So that's where we are, and right now the two schools are Hidden Valley and Martin Luther King Middle, which I'm extremely excited about because both of those schools are very close to where we are right now. So with that, I'm done talking. I want to hear people talking and asking questions because that's my favorite part.
It seems like if we put this model in place, we still run into the same issue of a vast difference in the amount of resourcing that we're able to put into place. What do we do about that? Second thing is, my mother-in-law years ago did something sort of interestingly similar in some ways. Went to Westover Hills Elementary School in Richmond, Virginia, which was a struggling school, and transformed it in part by partnering with businesses in the community, having them come out, participate, share resources, do work as tutors, things like that, and then also developing a report card system for parents. So parents were graded on whether or not they've been able to participate and really did turn that around in a significant way. What are the benefits, what are the side benefits from having this kind of appropriation of the school by the larger community?
So there are a couple of things. One is, well, right now, we don't have anything like this in our Title I schools. And it's less of a comparison about what they have in South Charlotte and more about what we can bring to the Title I schools and some of our struggling schools. The reality of it is that, okay, so let's take Myers Park High School as an example. Myers Park High School started a foundation, and one of the things that their foundation did was hire someone in schools to do case management for the struggling population that they had at the time. And so essentially what they identified was that they identified themselves that they had a group of kids who needed help. So in that framework, if Myers Park became a community schools model, yes, it would benefit some people, but it would also benefit those children who are really struggling. And the other piece of it is the reality is that we have private funds, private monies that go through public schools all the time via foundations. Even less and less about PTAs, private foundations, booster clubs, and all of those things. But the concern is about equity, but at the same time, we need to find solutions to address the most neediest, the most affected people. And right now, that's all of our kids in these Title I schools. Thank you.
continuing to rely on private funding, don't want to say ignore, but we forget that the true body to lobby is not the school board and it's not the county commission, the board of county commissioners. It is the general assembly. And we, and the collective we, in the village, in the neighborhood, and wherever, we don't address the funding in the right way. Because as long as there's a private company, as long as there's a foundation, as long as there's a corporation that will ante up the money, you will not get it from where the North Carolina Constitution says it should come from. There you go. And that's a problem for me. Because we keep coming with all of these creative ways to do what the state should be doing. And unfortunately, our legislators are continuing to needle away at public education in an effort to undermine it and get rid of it. And the other comment related to that is the public education system was never intended for people who look like me. Ever. That was not a thought. And now we are still faced with a system that does not adequately address our education. And when I think about the sheer number of people who look like me, who were killed, executed, lynched for learning how to read and write, and now here we are in a system that still is failing our children exceedingly well. That's a problem. Okay, that's my comment. My question is, how does this model truly engage parents and families so that not only are they benefiting, but their children are benefiting? Because the resistance at the school level to parent engagement is real. And I speak of what I know because based on my experience, it has been a fight. And I've been on the school improvement team. I've been PTA president. I've been PTA vice president. I've been PTSA president and secretary and all of that. I'm on the PTSO board now. I'm on the school improvement team, and I'm still fighting. And it should not be that way. Now, I have the temerity to fight, but what about the parent who's working that third shift job and can't come to the school? What about the parent that can't drive to the school, that's why their child is riding the bus? What about the parents that just are exhausted at the end of the day because they got 3 children and the oldest child is in high school and that schedule is a heck of a lot different from the one for the middle school student and the elementary student? How are you going to engage them? How does this model help us bring parents back into the schoolhouse where they were when I was growing up? Even though I was a teacher's kid, there were a whole lot of children who were not teacher's kids, and their parents and their families were in the schoolhouse. How do we bring that back so that there is accountability and improvement? And I'm sorry, that's a long way.
Hey, that's all right. Hey, we're here for it. I'll say a couple of things. One is that I can't wave a magic wand and change the makeup of our North Carolina General Assembly. As a matter of fact, for the most part, I mean, we could increase our voter engagement in Mecklenburg County. We could seek to elect people who we know won't change and flip parties on us. But at the end of the day, even as we make those strides, Mecklenburg County is on a Democratic island. Our focus in Mecklenburg County has to be right here, right now. And at the beginning of this, the one thing I spoke of is that this is not to take the place of funding my children. That's not what this is. But I've been at this a long time in Mecklenburg County. I moved here in 2012, and in 2015, I was trying to change schools. So that's a long time to wait. My daughter wasn't even in schools when I started this process. She's now 12 years old, and nothing much has changed in that time. So what that says is, as a mother and as a parent, I don't have time to wait on the General Assembly. I don't even have time to wait on CMS. What I have to do is identify a solution that's not the end all be all, but it does set the tone for academic excellence, and it does set the tone for community building and bringing parents into the fold. You're speaking to a parent who started a whole organization based on the inequity that I saw as a parent trying to make a change. So we speak the same language in that. What I would say is that, what time does your PTA have meetings?
The wrong time.
Now look, I don't even know listen, I don't even know what school it is. Is it on a Tuesday afternoon?
No, it's not. It's on a Monday morning at 7:30, Tuesday morning at 7:30 in the.
Oh, it's a Tuesday.
Tell me, how are parents who are working, who have multiple children, who,
But without knowing what school, how did I know about the time?
because none of them meet at the time that the parents say is the best time for them. And also.
Well, you asked your question.
I'm just saying, and when you try to change that, you are met with resistance, resistance, resistance.
Okay. Yes, and the power of this model is that it's hard to resist when parents and community members are on the same page. It's hard for a principal to operate under bias and to operate under this guise that the PTA should be held at Tuesday at 3:30 because that's an extended day for us anyway, and we got this meeting at 6 o'clock or whatever. It's much more difficult when we organize around the problem. So this exploration is part of it. Just like I'm here now, I actually contacted the city of Charlotte and said, hey, you need to be a part of this. Why? Because this is a place-based model. Again, if city council is watching, if the county commission is watching, if the school board is watching, the superintendent is watching, right now when our parents are in poverty, and when our parents are too busy working, we get isolated from the school, even isolated from our doctors, our everything, because we don't have time to breathe. But if you don't have time to breathe, I definitely do. He does, she does, she does. Go ahead.
No, I have to leave because I need to get back home at 8 o'clock, but I wanted to mention something real quick and thank you for something as well, Shemai. First of all, I like the partnership ideas with the city and county, and as I think about these community development centers that they're doing, resource centers they're doing, I think there's a lot of promise there for partnership. But I just wanted to share this based off of what you said, because this morning I was with legislators in Greensboro, and as I was listening to one legislator talking about, businesses giving back to the community and going on, and I finally raised my hand and said, but philosophically, is that the way that we want to do this? Because I would rather the businesses not go ahead and pay their taxes into a system and then fund it instead, and not, try that 0% tax rate that they're pushing for, or will have them for 2030. And I thought it was just really interesting because it really started this whole philosophical debate at the table. And at the end of it, I want to leave you on this because one of the representatives came up to me and she said this. She looked at me very sternly and she said, do the good you can in your local community because we are getting nowhere and it's bleak. It's a harsh reflection on what's going on in Raleigh, but you could have just seen her passion and the way that she said that, and she was looking at me, knowing I'm a school board member, there were other, city council and county commission kind of elected officials there from across the state. And I just thought that was really powerful, because it was almost like, do whatever good you can with what you do have. And so I'm leaving that hopefully on a positive note to say, this is a possibility of doing good locally with what we can against great challenges that exist. So more power to you on that, and thank you for bringing this. I wish I could stay later for more of the conversation, but I have to go. Thank you for coming.
I'm going to follow that one. Because one of the frustrations that I have as mayor is when I try to talk about the role the city can play in educating its future workforce, people look at me like I had three heads. Because I could not get any of my colleagues to even think about, oh, that's not, schools are not the city's job. We do development and zoning, we don't do schools. Not a single person would back me up. I did an after-school workshop, none of my colleagues came. And I still am on the board of Med Ed, because you can't build 300 apartment homes and not ask what that impact is to the schools. And you can't look at trying to build a future workforce if you're not educating every single child. But there's something about the way that we divide our budgets up. And as the state legislature, because we're in Charlotte and not Raleigh, we don't get the coverage of what's going on in Raleigh as much as they do in Raleigh. But that impacts everything we do. And you are right, we should not be absolving them of their responsibility to fund the damn schools. I'm going to say something else. But I would say anybody who advocates, when I went around running for mayor and talked to community groups, every single person mentioned the schools and the after-school programs and things their young people could do for enrichment. That was a theme. And all those parents who wanted to run for mayor was running for school board chair. Like, people want every elected official to care about the schools. And the more that we hold every single person accountable, the more that's going to happen. But I just wanted to share with you my challenge from a city perspective. And that is the beauty of something like bringing the whole community in. Because the city has neighborhood outreach, they have neighborhood leaders, they do all this stuff, they just want to do it separately from the schools in the county. So, there you go. Who's that?
I think Beth and then, I'm sorry, what's your name? Oh, all right. Hi. After Beth.
So I want to hype former Mayor Jennifer Roberts up, because I used to say the same thing. Once I started getting involved in the community and in schools and volunteering and all those things, I was like, I would ask at like EPC meetings, I was like, so when do you all each get together and meet? How often do you guys? And I was like expecting a response. And they looked at me like I had long years too. I'm like, wait a minute. The county, you can't talk about services without talking about what's needed in the schools for the families and how do you know which families to serve. CMPD and the sheriff and all of them are actually involved. You mean to tell me none of them? So we are making small progress, but like Shemaya said, we ain't got time for that. Because there are kids that have already failed, we failed them. And they end up, the school to prison pipeline is real. We need restorative justice measures. We need varying mental health protection and help in schools. And then we need to do that for the entire family. So for this particular zip code, is it more that they need food? I think they need food pantries and services in every school nowadays. I think that they need, clothing pantries in every school. I think that they need
People need when they're in poverty. Trust me.
it's all the same thing.
Right. It's always that. I'm glad you touched on that. Do you mind if I?
No, go right ahead.
So one thing that we're trying to do, or we're going to do, is not just measure poverty. Let's face it. Everybody in this room can tell you what people need, right? Because that's what we're into: social justice, things, anti-poverty, voter rights, all of those things. But what we don't do is take steps back to measure the assessments we have. I cannot tell you how many meetings I'm in with philanthropic organizations, with all the people, and they say, oh, well, we surveyed the people and they told us they were hungry. We surveyed people and they told us we needed affordable housing. Okay, but what is it that they have that they can give to their community? If you're a nurse's assistant, you have an asset. If you can do nails and hair, you have an asset. If you like me, ex-private sector person, you have skills that you can give to the community once you decide to leave. There are so many things but we never measure that. How can we, the only thing that counts is what you count. And that's part of, that's part of the culture shift that has to take place. We're not just trying to identify what you need because we know. But what we don't know is what you can bring. That's clear, because we don't ask you to come in. As a matter of fact, like what SY said, we trying to guard you out. We don't even care. Well, no, we don't care. We don't realize that despite your social economic status, you have something you can build into and take ownership. And I'm going to go to Maria. She's going to wait for a second.
Am I on?
Yes.
My name is Maria Macon, and I'm the founder and executive director of Mecklenburg Council of Elders. We do criminal record expungements. And what does that have to do with education? Thank you. The parents that come to have their criminal records expunged, one of the things they would ask, that was our primary thing. One of the things they would ask us is, what are you going to do for our children so that they don't follow in our footsteps? Usually parents want their kids to follow their footsteps. We do 300 criminal record expungements every 3 months. So we do 1,200 expungements a year. There are 30,000 criminal records coming through the court system every month. So you have these individuals getting their records expunged. The children that are in the schools are children and grandchildren of these people getting their criminal records expunged. There is an environment that is conducive to crime in just about every one of those households. And then we wonder, why can't they learn in school? Maybe little Johnny is out robbing somebody so he can get some money to help his mama pay the rent so they don't get evicted, so he will have a place to sleep. That's what's going on in Charlotte Mecklenburg school system. Before I ask my question, the first thing is I'm in a meeting, and I go to a lot of meetings. I'm in a meeting where someone is talking about solutions. There should not be a thing about they're going to resist it. Anybody resists anything you introduce to them that they haven't had before. It's going to be a resistance. We all old enough to see that. However, here you're talking about solution, and we should be saying, honey, what else can we do to help you move this forward? Should we go ahead and get some more people to come in here? That's where it should be. Yep. But my question is, in this model that's being presented, I did not hear, and I don't think you said anything about ACEs. That is the abusive childhood experiences that happen in our childhood, but what we've been learning in the 9 years of doing criminal record expungement, it manifests itself as adults. It could have happened when they were 4 years old. Fine. But it manifests itself, it comes alive, it's triggered when they're 35. And we get them, and so I wanted to know, I didn't hear that one thing. The other thing I wanted to know is if you all have looked at, or if you have, this is your program, if you have looked at Mecklenburg Council of Elders model that baby clothes there from birth to 8 years old, because the criminals that come in, or former criminals, to get their records expired, they want to be able, them men mostly, to go home to the mother and say, I know you say I haven't done anything else, but I bought this bundle of clothes here for you. We also have health care, mental health care, housing, because we're made up of several wraparound programs, clothing, food bank, and house painting skills, furniture restoration, natural hair braiding, culinary, and nails. We did all of that because I recognize I spent $85 whenever I go to the nail shop, and I'm saying I don't see any of our young kids there. It's a $7.5 billion industry. We should be teaching our kids some of these things. We used to have wood shop and home economics in class. We don't have those things anymore. So I'm asking you if that's, your model looks flexible enough to be able to include those things in. But I just want to, as personally, not even as executive director or anything, just thank you for standing here and talking about solutions.
Thank you. So there are a few things. A long time ago, we had GE close in Cincinnati where I lived in. And so you had all of these people who had lost these good jobs that some of them were college educated, some of them were not. And you know what they went back to school to do? Barbering, hairstyling. Those are jobs, believe it or not, that no matter what the economy is, will always stay alive. Until we can get some robots that can braid and do all this stuff, you're good to go. You never know, I might have to be a nail tech.
I have a question.
Yes.
There seems to be a lot of energy within the wedge about what's going on with CMS. What do you think is sparking that urgency out there?
Well, I'm
asking anybody.
Oh, okay.
But I mean, anytime they're either getting ready to have their own school system or another state. But if you look at the media, it's wall to wall to wall to wall to wall. There's no more room for people. What do you think is stimulating that kind of response? Anybody?
The same thing that triggered the response in the 60s and the 70s.
Grace.
Yes, same thing.
Very much so.
And the race and what has been tagged as socioeconomic disparities.
Grace.
Race, yes. Like I said, race first, yes. Yes.
Because how do you disrupt the system? There's a system of that. And if you ever disrupted the system, it might change a few diameters, your meters this way or that way, but it's the same system.
Well, in Reimagining America Project, we recognize the fact that systemic racism is a virus. You can't kill it, it just changes.
Right.
It's better than HIV and shifting its way it works. COVID.
The one thing that I see that would be extremely beneficial from the community schools is the model from Ohio, where every school is a community learning center. And that would avoid, I would hope, if we were to have that throughout CMS, that might just avoid children in East Charlotte, in my neighborhood, getting on a bus at 5:45, 5:30 in the morning to ride across town to the west side to go to an Ivy high school.
I agree, and I actually really advocate for, once we get down to that, setting a policy in place that any community that desires to have a learning center can have a learning center. And mainly because, if you think about Project Lift, And all of the people who would get up on TV and dog Project Lift and leadership and all the people, what did it do to those children in those schools? It left a stigma that there's something wrong with them, and that's why they needed to be lifted. And I gave that example earlier about Myers Park. Myers Park could be a community school, a community learning center, and it can benefit all of the whole entire school. Now, the difference might be that Communities in Schools is not the lead partner in it and providing people and all of that. It could be a church partner. It could be anybody who says, I want to partner with this school to become a community learning center. That's the advantage of this model, is that it's extremely flexible and it can meet the needs of anybody, but the most important part is it provides equity for our children, the children that are of lower social economic status. And I can answer your question.
You must have heard that.
Okay.
Because I was just thinking, I thought I asked a question and I did not hear an answer.
Okay, so the answer to your question is, and this is the organizer part of me, okay? In this model, we're not going into a community or into a school automatically assuming that the community, the parents, or the school actually want to address ACEs. Actually want to address ACEs. What we're doing is, hear me out, Sister Maria, hear me out. Okay? What we're trying to identify is the assets that the community and the people have in the first place. And then as those issues arise, because we all have a common knowledge in the first place about what poverty brings. We're not under, in other words, we don't have to call out ACEs to know that it's a problem as a community.
We don't have to call it ACEs. I'm not saying
Okay.
anything, I'm saying you.
Okay, so that's where this model comes into play. When we use terms like ACEs and programs and those things, those are the things that have taken the community out of the schools in the first place. Because what we've essentially done is we've taken the role of community organizers, and we've taken the role of social workers, even teaching to some degree, and academic it to the point that people put a price tag or a title on what's actually taking place. An example. No, I understood exactly what you were asking. If you're asking about how this model is going to address ACEs.
No, I didn't ask you that. I
Okay.
didn't ask you how, I saw it wasn't addressing it, so I didn't ask you how it's going to address it. My question was, how are you looking at it? I use ACEs because that's the term I assume you would understand. However, we don't call it ACEs and we do it every day. But it's trauma that's happening, and you don't have to wonder if 28216 or 28208 or 28213, 15, 17 have trauma issues. You don't have to ask anybody that. Yes, they do. That's the police station.
So I do know what ACEs is. I've taken a variety of trainings around that. But
all I'm asking, my question is, if there a place for it to be the trauma awareness, is there a place for it in your program? Because your program is bringing on some solutions. So have we thought about, is there a place for that to deal with the trauma? Because we talk about the leaves all the time. We never talk about the roots.
So there's a difference between a framework and a program and a model.
Okay.
This is a model.
Okay.
What you're speaking of is a program that could work within this model.
Is that a model that could embrace additional?
You address that with your wraparound services, but it may not come in the form of a program. It may come in the form of healing circles within a community. It may come in the form of a Narcotics Anonymous group. It may come in the form of a support group for domestic violence survivors. It may come in the form of a book club. It may come in the form of a self-care intervention group. It may come in the form of a program. Now here's the thing though. Another piece of this is we have services in schools right now that the parents don't even know who those people or those providers are. So a good amount of this is work towards building trust. So what I see a lot of times is, give a good example, one program called the Meals Place. Reggie Singleton. Okay, if people in the community know who Reggie is, but Reggie doesn't have a partnership in the school. Why? He has a place-based organization where he is doing strong work. The community trusts him to do his work, but does the school system trust him to do his work? What we're saying is that if the community trusts you, then we as a community support you in supporting our children.
Now you're getting to my answer.
Okay, that's okay. Well, that's all right. That's all right. We got it.
Mississippi needs help too.
Ooh, Mississippi, our strong.
So, I'm a little bit slow sometimes, but are you going to have a pilot at Hidden Valley Elementary? I mean, this model sounds great, and it would be wonderful if it were in every school in CMS, but you gotta start somewhere. And so if you start somewhere and you can prove it works, then other people are gonna be interested in following. But my question is, are you actually getting ready to implement this at a particular school?
Yes and no. Yes, we're at the start of it, but we're not starting with a pilot. We're starting with exploring whether the community would be receptive to this model in the first place.
Okay.
I'm reaching out, the next phase is reaching out to average everyday people. When I see people, hey, where do you live? I live in Hidden Valley. Oh, you do? Do you have kids in Hidden Valley Elementary? Connecting people one point at a time. I'm not going out to survey these people or ask them a ton of questions about what it is, nor do I feel like I need to speak with the entire community. But what I am trying to do is to get a wide enough sample of people often don't think about this, but churches are the place-based organization in the community. Why? Because they're physically there. Their people may not even really live in the community, but they're much more positioned in terms of their infrastructure and things like that to satisfy needs of the community. So I'm working with those groups. I'm working with anybody who is directly placed and positioned fairly closely with the Hidden Valley community.
So you're working with Genesis Project?
Not yet, but I know who they are.
Okay.
Camille, Cameo, Cameo Stevens.
No,
Yeah.
Camille is with them.
Okay, well, I got the people mixed up.
No, not the Tracy Black.
Okay, let me say this. What I will do is, if you know of someone who is a place-based organization, not an organization that's doing services in Hidden Valley, works there, lives there, breathes there, I want to talk to those folks first.
That's what I would do, because I know I've got another thing to do. But what I would tell you is that what we will do, because a lot of these people gravitate to our program, and we will set up an audience for you of that profile of people you just gave us. That's my word.
I'm accepting. Thank you.
My administrative assistant, so she make me keep my word.
She got my number on speed dial. She don't use it often, but that's all right.
But we will set up to tell us the date and time you need it. Genesis Project A lot of these others are part of Mecklenburg Council of Elders, our wraparound program. We do what is called, we don't do it enough, but we do blacks only town hall meeting. And that's when we can come and talk about our own dirty laundry and get it clean. And so we will set up a session for you, and we'll bring those people that you profile that you need. We'll have them there.
Perfect.
Because you need to get, I hear you saying it, I set up nonprofits, I hear you saying it, and I'm saying she need about 1,500 other men around doing that. So, but you talk about doing, you need more people, and I think we can help you with that.
Accepted. Invitation accepted. Yes. Okay. That invitation was well worth it. And just know that although we're in the exploration phase of this model, we're going to see some heavy winds in Hidden Valley and Martin Luther King Middle. And I'm very grateful for that invitation. And one thing I did not do was thank. Okay. I didn't realize you were that close, but okay. I'm extremely rude because I did not say thank you to Joanne Jenkins. She decorated the tables, she put us in space, and she kicked everybody's tail to be in order. Got the food. And although she's probably looking at me with the side eye, I don't care. I'm going to say thank you to Joanne Jenkins for the work that she's done and put into this and given me a platform to talk about something that I'm very passionate about. So I thank you, Joanne. You're welcome. And Kevin too. Kevin, you too. You ain't bad either, Kevin.
For those of you that are not members of the Reenactment Project, there is a sheet we'd like you to fill that out and tell us the 3 things that you are concerned about in terms of racism. Then we invite you to join us in the education team or any of our other teams: criminal justice, healthcare justice, voting rights, what else?
Healthcare, voting rights,
environmental, thank you, judicial, criminal justice, thank you.
Any type of justice you want to get involved in, call right. Yes, it's fine.
And looking at the list on this sheet that's been provided, it's very good. I would like to recommend, if I may, that the school improvement team be included on this list, and not just the school board member of the district in which your school is, but every school board member information.
Yes, okay. We can
Take for it.
That's fine.
What is it?
Our school,
Thank you, Brandon.
our school improvement teams in every school in CMS or certain schools in CMS?
They're supposed to be in every school in CMS, but the issue is the execution of whether or not you actually have a working group.
Yeah, our team had what?
And they're supposed to be parent-led.
Yes.
Very often they are school administration-led.
And very robotic, right?
That does not bode well for parent engagement and other
Because they
things.
just want to check the box. We do a lot of things are done to check the box and say, oh yeah, this school district is doing this and they're scoring good on this, and so that box.
Well, I'm not even going to regurgitate the whole fight I got into about having schools, people that worked in the school, on the school leadership team as parents and all that other crap. But what I will say is, to the school's defense, the school leadership team is a state, or school improvement team is a state mandate. It has to happen. So what happens is, from a district standpoint, they're getting closer to where they actually give the school a timeline on when certain things are supposed to take place. What happens is they wait till the beginning of the school year to form the school improvement team. Then they have all this administration paperwork that they're trying to blow up your, you know. And that leads to the parents not really having a say or to be able to impact anything. They have the plans already drawn out and they just want you to sign. That's it. So you're right, and we have some ways to go with this community schools model. If we strengthen that SIT to its fullest fidelity, which is a state mandate in the first place, we have the laws and the policies on the books to do exactly what we're trying to do. But this pushes that. It'll push that envelope.
And often the plans are not user-friendly.
No.
And by that I mean, if you're a parent that's not well versed in education speaking, it's like reading Greek. And you have to have a syllabus or glossary that goes along with the school improvement plan, and that's not provided unless you start saying, well, we need something so we can understand what all these acronyms mean, et cetera, et cetera. I'm just telling you from firsthand experience what it's like. And
Joanne said, if you want to be involved, I'm going to say, we need you to be involved with the Reimagining America Project. And if you're involved and interested in education, we need you at the table with the education community. I think that this is a perfect place for you to plug in, to have this conversation, to continue to move it forward. So I just wanted to echo what Joanne had to say and emphasize it a little bit more.
There was something else too. So for our people who may be watching later on or streaming live, what is the best way to get involved if you're not in this room and you have an interest?
Best way to get involved in the Reimagining America program is to go to our webpage, reimaginingAmericaProject.org. If you can't go to the webpage, go to our Facebook page, Reimagining America Project on Facebook. And if you look us up, you can be able to get access to all of our information.